I'm so happy to have you here, Becca. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Paige.
Yeah. And I'd love to start before we get into motherhood and these stories, these beautiful stories of so many different paths to motherhood. I'd love to start with you learning a little bit about you as a person before you became a mother, before you got into medicine. Could you share
Mm.
with us a little bit about your early childhood dreams, or if you thought you would be a doctor, or just kind of set up that path that got you
Sure,
to medical school and led you to this beautiful
sure.
book?
Thank you so much. I didn't think about going into medicine when I was younger.
Yeah.
I didn't have family members in medicine, really. Some extended family in kind of ancillary medical
Yeah.
roles, but no doctors, nothing like that. I have always loved to write in whatever other interest I was
Yeah.
pursuing. I would come to the writing side of that, I found, whether in something more literary or in kinds of science. I
Yes.
always went back to writing. But the way that I got into medicine was pretty circuitous. When I was in college, I was an anthropology major,
Okay.
social anthro. So I was really fascinated by life stories. That was a
Yeah.
lot of my work. I thought about becoming an archaeologist. That was my initial intention. But then I realized that I liked living people more
Yeah.
than artifacts
I
and
can
not
relate.
living
Yeah.
people. But I'm not good with sun and
Yeah.
heat. It's
Yeah.
like, well, that might not be the best career for me practically.
That's right.
Anyway, when I was a sophomore and a junior in college, I
Yeah.
was president of my outing club, leading all these backcountry trips. And that's always been a passion of mine. I've been camping and hiking and traveling with my family since I was about 4, I
Oh,
would say.
cool. Yeah.
My parents were really great about exposing me to that, and they loved that too. So I thought I should learn some first aid to be a
Oh,
responsible trip
interesting.
leader.
Yeah. How old
I
were
gave
you when
up.
you decided to do that?
That
Teenager?
would have been my junior year of
Oh, that's
college.
so
So
cool. So
what
like
would I have
20. Yeah,
been? Yeah,
21. Yeah.
yeah, probably it's 19 or 20.
Okay.
I signed up for a wilderness first responder course over spring break of my junior year, just expecting that it was a
Yeah.
thing I was doing out of obligation. And I was completely surprised to find that I loved it. I would fall asleep with the textbook open on my chest every night, lying
Oh.
in the bed trying to read
Yeah.
it. I was just immersed in it.
Yeah.
And so then I thought, well, maybe this is something I actually would love to do. And I mean, it integrates so many of my interests. And essentially, long story short, I went on to become a wilderness EMT in the summer in between
Mhm.
my junior and senior years. Senior fall, I took a few classes in medical sociology and anthropology
Yeah.
to learn about more of these life stories angles, but from the medical point of view,
Yeah.
and think about that path and if it was really something I wanted to do, because it's no small commitment.
No.
And then I took my first pre-med requirement spring of senior year, like a bio 101
Yeah.
equivalent, and did 3 years of post-baccalaureate night school while working several jobs, including working in a psychology lab, again, more life stories, and
Yeah.
working in the editorial department as an assistant at New England Journal of Medicine. So that another tying in my love of
Yeah.
writing and words and communication, medical communication.
Yeah.
So that's the backstory of how I got into
Yes.
medicine.
I always get inspired by the backstory because I find the more and more people I speak with, we all have these seeds along the way. And people who listen to this
Yeah.
podcast know that I'm totally in awe of that. The thread that runs through people's lives,
It's
it's
fascinating for everybody.
fascinating. And I think
Absolutely.
as a parent, especially, it's important to remember and trust that that's happening in our kids' lives and the people we
Right.
love, their lives so that
It's a
we
great
can let
reminder.
go. Yeah.
It's a great reminder that we got to where we are by not always the most direct or linear paths.
Yes.
And hopefully others will find their way
Yeah.
too, including our kids.
Yeah. And then, so you get yourself to medical school. Was getting married and pursuing motherhood also an obvious dream for you? Like, was that, or is that something that you were really thinking about as it related to balancing motherhood and
Yeah.
career?
Um, I wouldn't say that it was something I sort of thought ahead a lot about, in the sense of, some people sort of dressing up or playing bride or
Yeah.
wedding or playing mom. I don't remember doing a lot of that,
Yeah.
but I'm grateful to have a solid foundation of family. And it was something I wanted to be
Yes.
part, continue to expand that family, coming from my own original family, nuclear and extended and
Yeah.
chosen family,
Yes.
and then building that. So finding my people that I really cared about, and
Yeah.
many of the friends I made in college and especially medical school, I'm still in really close touch with.
Yeah.
So building that chosen family, and then of course being open to finding a partner, and not everybody wants that, but I did.
Yeah.
And I actually chose to go to medical school geographically in a place where a lot of people like to go hiking
Oh, that
and
makes
do outdoors
sense.
things. Like I thought
Yeah.
about schools that were in cities, I thought about schools that were outside of cities. And a huge part of my decision was based on going somewhere that the people I met would be more likely to want to go on
Yeah.
a bike ride on the weekend than to go,
To a
like
bar.
to a show, to a bar.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there's plenty of that anywhere, but
Yeah.
I wanted the focus to be on like more experiential
Yeah.
outdoor type things.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of how I chose my locations.
Yes. And then take us a little bit through, you open this beautiful book with your own story, and your story is woven throughout other women's stories.
Yeah,
So I know that
thanks.
story begins when you are in medical school
Yes.
or
So
residency, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was residency. So my husband and I met when I was in medical
Yeah.
school. And I was just starting medical school. He was just finishing up college. And so we went through that experience together. He's not
Yeah.
in medicine. And then by the time we'd been together around 7 years, I'd finished medical school. I was finishing up what turned out to be my first residency.
Yeah.
I went
I know
back
the
later,
story.
but that's a
Yes.
separate
That's
part of the story.
that's in the book for the
That's in the
listeners who are
book.
intrigued with that. That's in the book.
Yeah. So I'd started out in public health and preventive
Yeah.
medicine, wanting to do environmental public health. No surprises from what I've just said, and that kind of focus and children's environmental health. And I had finished that I was finishing it up and about to start my first kind of attending job, supervisory physician job out of
Yeah.
residency, when we thought, well, that's a pretty good time to think about starting a family. And that is where this all began.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
I think the way that the book is structured, where it's your story is woven in with other women's stories,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm curious about is how did you track your story? Like, were you keeping a journal at the
Mm.
time that this was all unfolding? And at what point do you start to really track
Yeah.
other women's stories? Or are you a journal writer, or just,
I'm not.
okay.
I'm not at all. So
Yeah.
it's a really valid question.
Yeah.
Looking back, so the stories of the other women kind of came together gradually in terms of my own, which is the framework, as you've alluded to, for the book, the
Yeah.
structure of the book. These events started happening about 17 years ago
Okay.
now, 17 to 18 years ago now.
Yeah.
I would say I started writing them about 10 years ago.
Okay.
So I hadn't kept records of anything during the time we were going through the things that we talk about,
Yeah.
but they were still fresh enough. It's
Yeah.
not like it had been nearly 20 years as it has now.
Yeah.
There was still an immediacy to the experience. My kids were really young.
Yeah.
When I started writing, they would have been about 5 and 3 or so.
Yeah.
And now they're teenagers, obviously,
Yeah.
because math.
Yeah.
And I remembered everything so vividly. I think when we
Yeah.
go through these kinds of experiences, or any intense experiences, whether good or bad or oversimplified terms, whether joyous or full of grief or
Yeah.
whatever emotions they evoke, when they're this intense, they stick with us.
Yes.
And even the visual details. I have a really visual memory, so I'll remember what I was wearing
Yes.
in a very intense time, or what someone else was wearing, or the color of the carpet or something like that. And
Yeah.
those visuals evoke a lot of the memory.
Yeah. I have
Uh,
that with playlists. So I'll often make
yes, music.
yes.
Yes. What
And
was playing?
yeah. And for me, and I think maybe, I don't know if you're like this too, but I think a lot of people are like this. It helps me move the emotion. So I'll create a playlist that purposely makes
Hmm.
me sad if there's some grief
Oh,
thing, or
yeah.
lifts me up if I'm like, getting excited to go on a trip somewhere. But if I
Yeah.
hear that song years later, it's like I can feel that time, like
Yes.
almost to the point where I can't hear certain songs unless I want to go back to that
Yes. Yeah,
moment. It is visceral.
absolutely. Our senses really, they evoke our emotions. Visceral, that's the perfect word, what you just
Yeah.
said, because I mean, there's a lot of research about smell
Yes.
evoking emotion because
Yes.
of the loci in the brain where they're connected. But I think it can be true of all the senses,
Yeah.
really invoking those powerful memories and images.
Yeah. And as
Yeah.
it relates to motherhood, I think so
Hmm.
much of family life and living together in a home, I think
Hmm.
so much about smell. Like the laundry
Mm,
going, how it
hmm.
has a certain
Yeah, I
smell with
do.
the dry, and there's so much laundry,
Yeah.
and it's easy to
So much
resent
laundry.
laundry. So I
So much
really
laundry.
try to like befriend laundry. And some of that is smell and touch. Like when the girls were really little,
Sure.
I had 3 kids under 3. I would
Yeah.
look at the size of their clothes, like as I was folding it, and be like, okay, the clothes are not always going to be this small, just to be
Oh.
like in it, and try to
I
relate to
remember
it.
taking a picture. Speaking of remembering clothing and visual and
Yeah.
images, I had one time on the drying rack in our laundry room, I
Yeah.
had all these clothes out, the kids' clothes, especially those one-piece jammies.
Yes.
And
Oh,
they're
they're the
all
best.
colorful and cute. There was,
Yes.
I remember, a purple set with elephants all over it, colorful elephants and flowers, and a tan set with moose all over it and
Yeah.
moose feet.
Yeah.
And I took a picture of this board of laundry
Yeah.
and texted it to my husband and said, "Cutest load of laundry ever."
Oh, I love it.
And that exactly what you're saying. You have
Yeah.
to, if you can, I mean, I'm, oh my gosh, laundry is the bane of our
It
existence as
is.
parents,
It
right?
is.
But if we want to find a way
Yeah.
into something to appreciate about it,
Yes.
right? The
That's
smell,
right.
the tactile, the visual of the colors.
Yeah,
And
and the
I
passage of
love it.
time, you know, it's from
Yes.
onesies to the princess dresses or the costume, the Batman costume,
Yeah.
and now I have a ninth grader who's super into basketball, so
I
everything
was going
is
to say
the
the sports
jersey and the
jerseys.
yeah, and the
Yes, the
Umbro and the
bittersweet. You can see
yeah,
the passage
Nike.
of time through the laundry.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then, you
yeah,
asked about the other women too, and
yeah,
over time, so if you just took one, so each story, the other 21 women,
yeah,
is a self-contained vignette, if you will, but they're long, they're
yeah,
substantial, but each one is self-contained within where it intersects with a point in my own story. It's placed
yeah,
there. And each one of those, the whole project took 10 years, but each chapter, each woman's story was a collaboration with her over several years, typically.
yeah,
And so the way that these were crafted, there was a lot about memory, but what it really was storytelling and oral history. So I had a little handheld recorder,
yeah,
and if she's local to me, we might go for a walk or meet at a coffee shop. If she's not, we might have a phone call, many phone calls across
yeah,
time zones. There were people all over the US and a couple in other countries as well. So we would have to navigate the time changes and such. But over time, we would get these recordings. I would transcribe each one and then think about that story
yeah,
that she'd been willing to share in talking with me, in addition to if she had journal entries herself
yeah,
or old messages she'd sent to friends and family to update them during some particular issue going on, a
yeah,
challenge in her life. Everything she was able to give me, I tried to take it and weave them together to create the most compelling version of her narrative that we could
yeah,
using her words. But I tried to sort of write it, if you will,
yeah.
creating a narrative arc, deciding where to start the story, how to end it, all of this. And
So
then I
great.
would give it back to her and say, and highlight and say, this part, am I getting this right? I feel like I'm missing something. Or
Yeah,
could you flesh this out? Could we talk about this on another call? Or could you write me one paragraph on this topic? And then take that and try to, again, create a cohesive tone to
yeah.
all of the stories, but preserve her voice
Yes,
as much as
which
I
I
could.
think you did a beautiful job doing that, and
Thank you.
it's so well crafted with the placement of
Thank you.
because there's so many different ways that people come to family life and motherhood, and
Right.
really learn how to attach and connect, and also deal with
Hmm.
loss. It's all of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
did you have a moment where you could see the structure of this book, or in your own journey of, let's call it just a fertility journey to arrive
Mhm.
to motherhood? Was there a moment that you thought, wow, I really want to bring along these women who have really helped me? Because what I found in the book is that these women really helped you, as
Yeah.
you were going through, starting with Deborah, I think was the first,
Yeah,
the
she was my
supervisor.
obstetrician, that's right.
Yeah. And her story runs through it, and then the book ends with her, which is so beautiful.
Yes. Thank you.
So and then along the way, then you become, in your second residency, you become holding space
Mhm.
for family medicine, and women
Right.
going through that at the same time that you're still on a path to motherhood. So
Uh-huh, it was a big leap of faith.
yeah, to be going through it and then also be a guide for other people going through it,
Right.
I just thought was remarkable. So I want to understand
Thank
about
you.
the resilience and the choice in that moment, but before we do
Mhm.
that, I want to understand, was there a moment in your mind where you were like, "Oh, I could see how this all fits together," and you were ready to confront it and really look at it again?
Yeah. Now, after that second residency in family medicine and focusing on women's health, I had completed that and I was into my first attending job,
Okay.
which I loved. I love taking care of individual people and families, and especially when it comes to children's health and
Yeah.
prenatal care and women's health and preventive care and sexual health and supporting all those complicated, difficult
Yeah.
conversations. I love that. But I realized a few years into that it wasn't sustainable for me to work the hours that I was
Yeah.
working in that kind of a setting while my husband was also working full time, and now we have 2 young kids at home. And so I thought, okay, I need to pull back from this and find what's next for me clinically.
Yeah.
And as I was doing that, the summer after I left that job, not quite knowing what I was going to do next clinically, I
Yeah.
thought, well, I want to write something because I've always loved to write again. I want to write something, create something that would help other families.
Yeah.
And given that public health background, it's like I want to help a population
Yeah.
now. If I'm
Yeah.
not in the moment helping individuals, the family medicine side of things, how can I use the public health lens to help a wider population of people with these kinds of challenges? So I thought about what might I be able to write, and I'm also a lactation consultant, and I went into
Yeah.
that to counter the idea that is, I think, too prevalent that you have to do things a certain way. You have to breastfeed you have for this long and this
Yeah.
way, and this is what success looks like. And I don't believe that. I prefer to say I was an infant feeding consultant
Yes.
and meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
So at first I thought, well, maybe I'll write a book about that to support new families. And so my impulse was to collect short, vignettes and little sidebars
Yeah.
about those experiences to reflect the themes. And very quickly, I realized I was drawn to the vignettes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to write
For
all
sure.
those. So then I
And
thought,
the
well, maybe,
complexity too, Becca. I feel like you're
yes,
very good
yes.
at dealing with all the complexity of our stories.
That's my favorite part is
Yeah.
the hard parts are the best.
Yes.
It's where you dig in and get the real compelling, interesting, meaningful parts and you do the work.
Yeah.
And so I thought I could collect, from women that I'd worked with over time,
Yeah.
their stories about this to help support other women. But really, almost immediately, I realized that was too limited in scope. I didn't want to only preserve and share stories about early parenthood.
Yeah.
I wanted to help people understand the complexities of families.
Yes.
So, and a few of the patients I had worked with over the years, both during my residency and in my attending practice beyond that, really crystallized that for me. Several of them are in the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would include, for example, Anna's story, Erin's story, Kelly's story.
Yeah.
These are people I had known throughout my residency, and many of them also then followed me to the community clinic that I went to after I graduated and came to see me at that practice. And
Yeah.
those are the people who made it clear to me that this book wasn't a book of birth stories or
Yeah.
pregnancy stories or fertility. Because fascinating as those stories are, that's just the beginning, right?
Yes. Yes.
So then I thought, well, let's talk to them about if they would like to participate in, collecting some of these longer, deeper stories that show a bigger context of their lives. And that's how
Yeah.
this began.
And did you know you would include your own story and open with it?
Yeah. Yeah. When I
Yeah.
first started, I never thought of it as an anthology. It's not an anthology because I didn't just ask people to give me a written story and then I would lightly edit it. I wanted
Right.
to collaborate with these people to really craft each story
Yeah.
really intentionally, as you've alluded to, have it follow a narrative arc and like be a self-contained
Yeah.
entity
Yeah.
and be able to stand on its own, but also be told in an intentional way
Yes.
and
Yes.
not just linear.
Yes.
Usually not at all linear.
Yeah.
So while I knew I would always
Yeah.
include our family story, at first I was like, well, does our story go at the beginning so the reader
Yeah.
knows that, or does it go at the end because it's kind of a culmination and it ties into other people's stories?
Yeah.
And I did have a moment only partway through the process. I was actually waiting to meet up with one of the women, with Stacy, who's in
Yeah.
the book. I was waiting to meet up with her after she dropped her kids off, and we were going to either work on her story or just visit. I don't know, she was a friend outside of that.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in this parking lot waiting to meet her, and I realized, wait a minute, if I group these stories that on where they kind of intersect with ours,
Yeah.
and where they've made me think about things differently in my own story, I could pause at intervals. I could tell part of my story
Yeah.
and then include a story or several stories on that theme, that era of our lives and our struggles, and how much more powerful would that be? And so that idea just
Yeah.
came to me really suddenly while sitting waiting to connect with one of these women,
Yeah.
and I went with it. And I've been so grateful for that. It's what makes it feel really unusual and so rewarding.
Yes. And another experience I had as a reader as it relates to that is that we heal through each other's stories. And you really talk about
Mm-hmm.
this in the book that when
Mm-hmm.
you are going through your own healing, you're impacting everyone around you is healing through your healing. And I just, the
Oh,
way that it's structured is,
yeah, we try.
it embodies that message actually.
Well, thank you for finding
Yeah.
that in it, because that was our intention.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I mentioned this earlier, the word resilience. You decide to pursue this second residency, and it's a big
hmm
decision, and it's time, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
affects you financially and
Yeah.
energetically. And you have a child. I think you have your son.
Not
Oh,
yet.
you don't have your son yet. Okay.
We didn't quite know. I like to say we were 20 minutes pregnant with him.
Okay. So you're
When
pregnant. Yeah.
I had the opportunity there was kind of a sudden opportunity to step into a residency. I
Yeah.
like to say that the baby was planned, but the residency was a
Yes.
surprise.
Yes.
So we had been just cleared after medical complications to try again,
Yeah.
literally like that week, the
Yeah.
week before. And so, as it turns out, the day that I decided I got this offer, to do the residency, and I took this leap of faith to say yes to it, I found out a few days later, I was able to test and find out that I was pregnant with who turned out to be my son, born 9 months to the day
Yeah.
from when I accepted that residency position.
Amazing. So, talk to
Yeah.
us about how you found the resilience to make that decision, what you've learned about resilience. Resilience is a big theme in my work. I'm in
Yeah.
conversations with women all the time, and it comes up all the time. So, I
hmm
want to hear what you've learned about it, and see and share maybe how if that lines up with. I
Yeah.
have a lot of thoughts about this with women and
Me
resilience.
too.
Yeah.
Me too. We could talk about that for an
Yeah,
entire
we
podcast
could.
in itself. Um, I think resilience is very much a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
And there's so much that's powerful about it and encouraging and inspiring. I do think we can fall into the trap, if you
Yeah.
will, of expecting resilience or celebrating it too much, to the point where we say, well, if someone isn't pulling herself up
Yes.
enough, then we're blaming her for not rallying, not rising to the occasion, whatever
Yeah.
metaphor or cliche you want to use. And so I just want to be careful about it, because I really value the ability to,
Yeah.
get through things for myself and for others. I
Yes.
value it. I respect it. I want to honor it. But for me, I think what I've come to is that the much more, and I'll use the word resilience unapologetically,
For sure.
but
Yeah.
the subtlety of it is that what it really means to me is persistence.
Yeah.
And that's where I prefer to focus.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And it sounds like the women to whom you've witnessed, you've been a witness
hmm
in their lives. They have
hmm
shown you that.
Absolutely.
And
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 this whole project is
exactly.
an exercise in trust and persistence. I mean,
Yes.
can you believe? Not only did I do this, sure, great, thank you for acknowledging, but like these amazing women stuck with this
Yeah.
project for 10 years. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so grateful to them. It's
Yeah.
been truly the most rewarding thing I've done
It
professionally.
is like family life. I mean, it's
Yeah.
trusted and
Yeah.
persistent. You have to persist.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
there's this quality about, like you said, what looks like or what we deem resilient, because the culture holds a certain standard and
Yeah.
decides what's resilient and what's not resilient. I find there's an undercurrent of guilt in women's
I was
lives.
just thinking
Yeah, do
that
you
word.
find that?
Yes.
Yeah, tell
Yes.
tell us
Yes.
more about that in your
Yes.
practice.
Oh my gosh. So many, so many thoughts. That's where we get to holding people responsible for things they can't control, right?
Yeah,
And oh, so many complexities in that. I think that we can recognize that things don't go as we wished all the time,
yeah,
and we can pivot
yeah,
and try to make the best of those without simplifying, oversimplifying what's going on,
yeah,
and say, well, this meant that I had to change how I was doing something,
yeah.
or maybe more importantly, how I was thinking about something, how I framed it, and what we define as success and failure
Yes.
and all of
The
that.
definitions are
Um,
huge. To go back to the
yeah.
definition and ask how
Yeah.
am I defining that? And is that
Right.
definition wide enough to include my
Right.
experience right now?
Right, because it can make people feel like they're to blame for things
Yes.
that really were not in their power.
Yeah.
And even afterward, we can control how we react to things, but that doesn't mean they're still going to start, going our way in the end.
Yes. Yes.
I think this comes to, I think one of the biggest themes of Held Together and a lot of your work and your conversations in general.
Yeah.
It's about all these stories are about growth and change.
Yeah. I find with how hard we are so hard on ourselves as women.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so, how guilt intersects with resilience in the conversations I have with women is it
mhm,
sounds like I shouldn't have fallen apart. My kids saw me crying, or, my husband expects that I can just do it all with having no
mhm,
pause or no breakdown or need for
mm,
recovery.
mhm,
Or I expect myself to do it all with no
mhm,
recovery. And to me, it goes back to that idea of what you said earlier that there's only one way to be resilient, and that's if you
mhm.
just rise above it, rise to the occasion. But sometimes rising to the occasion looks like sitting down in the occasion. You know what I mean? Where it's
I
like,
do. Rest is okay. Rest is
yes,
resilience. Rest is resistance.
yes. And emotion is part of being resilient. I think we get the notion
Mhm,
that resilient means I'm transcending the emotional response and I'm just
mm,
powering through. And really,
mm.
resilience is meeting the emotional moment, with the
You know,
best that
yeah,
you
that
have.
makes me think about you mentioned Devorah's chapter and how, we do meet
Yeah.
her at the beginning. She's my obstetrician through all the complications.
Yeah.
And in her story, near the end of the book, she talks about a really, really difficult thing that happens to her as a young adult.
Hmm.
I try not to give away too
I
much
agree.
about the
I like
stories,
that you're
but
doing it that way. Yeah.
yeah. So she talks about this, and she talks about how she wants to present that to her kids.
Yeah.
This plays a lot into what you were just talking about. How is it okay to fall apart in front of our kids?
Yeah.
She wants her children to understand that this love, this experience, this connection was so important to her that losing it really, really did change her.
Yeah.
She doesn't want her kids to think that she's uncomfortable
Yeah.
showing them how much it meant to her, or even worse, that it didn't mean this much to
Yeah.
her if she
Yeah.
holds in her feelings. So she really uses that as a way to raise her own children
Yeah.
in honor of the legacy of this relationship that she wishes she could still have.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to end the book, too, to meet her in the beginning and go through
Right,
all
thanks.
the moments and to meet her at the end in that more intimate way. I loved that
Right, and
part
you
of
get
it.
to see how she became that person, as I
Yes.
like to say, who was able to care for me exactly as she would have wanted to be cared for herself.
Yes, yes. And why do you think that doesn't happen more in the medical field? Like when you were describing how she attended to
Mhm,
you, I mean it was
mhm.
just this whole other energy. It was this whole other presence that she brought to you that you needed so badly in that moment. And yes, her care saved your life, but her presence and the space that she held helped you to
Mhm.
heal. I felt like it at a
I
very
agree,
to help you
absolutely.
even to continue pursuing motherhood.
Mhm. It was all about listening. I think listening is the core of our connection, has always been the foundation of our connection, and when she and I first met,
Yeah.
as you saw, I had gone through a lot
Yeah.
of things already
Yeah.
in a very short period of time,
Yeah.
and it was gonna get worse, but, it was already a little tricky, and many times, every time pretty much until
Yeah.
that, people had almost every time. There was one other person who really listened before her. You'll see that. But she's the one who sent me along that ended up having me meet Devorah.
Yeah.
But almost everyone else had either dismissed me or at least minimized my
Yes.
concerns,
Yes.
and or outright said like they didn't think what I thought was happening was what was happening, and it turned out those were the things that were happening,
Yes.
and it put me in a really dangerous situation for them to have ignored me.
Yes.
And so when I met Devorah, I felt like she and the other supervising physician that she was working with that day, because she was a senior resident, like chief resident running the emergency room obstetrician
Yeah.
consult service, she was the first person to really listen and take in what I was saying without superimposing her own assumptions right at the beginning of our conversation, of my presentation of my story. And that persisted.
Yeah.
So when later I'm going through a different complication, I'm still working with
Yeah.
her. There's a time where she says to me, "Oh," I say, "I think this is what's happening." And we've already been through the initial
Yeah.
round of things that everyone else blew off and she believed me and then she helped me with and saved my life quite literally.
Yes.
Then the next thing happens and I'm like, "I think it's this really rare thing." And she's like, "Oh, Becca, it can't be that thing. That
Yeah.
would be too rare to, and especially after all the other things, that can't be what's happening." But although she says that, her actions don't reflect
Yes.
in any way that she's dismissing me. She
Yeah.
says that to me and we kind of laugh about it. And then she does exactly what needs to be done to consider the possibility of the
Yes.
thing that I said. And it
Yes.
turns out it was that thing.
Yes.
But she never had to agree with my
Yes.
assessments. She didn't have to think, "Oh yeah, we're definitely following that path now just because you suggested it." But she truly heard what I was saying, and
Yes.
that was what was missing before.
Yes. It made me think of the word respect. And
Mhm.
I find that in this book that you've created too, there's such deep respect and
Oh, I love
reverence
that.
for someone's personal experience. And even though she's coming at you with her scientific mind and what she's seen and all the things, and it is super
Mhm.
rare, but
Mhm.
you have your intuition and you have
Mhm.
your experience,
Mhm.
and it was the right amount of respect offered to
Mhm.
you, and then you did the things that you needed to do, and then it turns out that your intuition was spot on. I'm interested in this difference between intuition and fear also. Like, are you, having gone through what you've gone through, do you
So
feel
important.
more trusting of your intuition? Do you find working with patients, how do you guide them to trust their intuition? What are your thoughts
Yeah,
on that
that's a
topic?
fascinating whole realm. I think intuition is something that we gain over time from experience.
Yeah.
And when we start out, we may have it from time to time, but doubt it more because we don't have enough experience to back it up.
Yeah.
And I think intuition is not a kind of mystical thing.
Yeah.
It's just informed in a way that we are synthesizing
Yeah.
the years of knowledge, the observations, the stories we've heard over time, and we're not always doing it consciously. We
Yes.
can't always pinpoint an outline of how we came to the conclusion or the feeling that we have about what's
Yeah.
happening, but it's informed. It's not because we're
It's like
being
magic, like dropping
dropped a message.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say
Yeah.
we're not being dropped a message. That was exactly what I
Yes.
was thinking. It's nothing magical, nothing
Yeah.
mystical. It's the cumulative effect of experience and listening. But
Yes.
I think we have to be open to we have to be listeners
Yes.
because it's very easy, even as clinicians, to dismiss our own intuition
Yes.
when it doesn't quite fit the algorithms.
Yeah. It also makes me think of this newer idea that I have around intuition. I've been talking a lot about this.
Mhm.
I ran a couple of, facilitated a couple of groups last week, and that was the topic, was intuition.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
heard a lot of women tell me examples. Your point about it comes from experience, I think it also comes from the experience of yourself. It comes from self
Mm.
knowledge of, like, you knew something was off because you know you and you know how you feel when
Yeah.
something was off. And that was so rare that that would happen to you. For
Right.
those of you listening, we're purposely keeping you engaged in this book. Like, because I don't like when podcasts tell you everything about the book, because then I'm like,
No.
then I don't want to buy the book. So you'll have to go buy this book and read
And
it.
it's more
But
fun
it's,
to discover it on your
yes,
own. Yeah, of
yeah.
course. We want you to be
So
surprised by some of
we're
these twists and
shrouding it
turns.
in mystery, but it is like, whoa, how is that happening after all these other things have happened? But you know your own body. And I think that's so powerful what you said, all of that information, even back to when we were talking about music and
Mhm.
smells and senses earlier,
Mhm.
it's all stored in there of how you synthesize information. So your
Yeah.
intuition is true for you straight out of self knowledge.
And then you're learning to trust yourself.
Yes.
That's another element of trust.
Yeah.
Well, and
So,
trust
yeah.
yourself, but leave room for the evidence. We do talk quite a bit about that in the book, and
Yeah.
there are several stories that really demonstrate this tension
Yes.
between the unknowable and kind of the rational scientific.
Yeah.
And I think the best summary of all of that is to say that they really can both exist. We can hold both of those things at
Yeah.
once. And I think Tina's story is an especially powerful example of that.
Yeah.
As an engineer,
Yeah.
how she's always been super rational minded and logical thinking and going down the steps of expected things to do and plans.
Yeah.
And then something happens that just completely shatters that for her.
Yes.
And out of that, she comes to have experiences that she can't explain with her rational mind.
Yeah.
And I hope that the reader will trust her as she learns about her story initially enough to say that when we come to that point and Tina is experiencing things that don't make sense, the reader is like, yep, doesn't make sense, but I believe you. And
Yeah.
because I know this person for gosh, almost 20 years.
Yeah.
I've known Tina, and it's a very accurate depiction of
Yeah.
who she is.
Yeah.
And I love it that both of those things can coexist.
Absolutely. So, what do you find now that you have gotten to the point where you're raising your own kids? I mean, that's the story. You get to the point where you're a mom to two children,
Mhm. Mhm.
and now you are shepherding women and listening to stories about how they arrive to family life and then you support family life. What is it
Mhm.
that keeps people engaged in family life, wanting family life? Why is family life so special? Not just to you, but to all of us. I mean, you've seen it, and I see it in my job too.
Mhm.
It's so sacred and special.
Mhm.
What do you think that is? What is the quality of that experience for people that drives them to get through
Mhm.
all the things we get through, to stay in it, to pursue it, to find it?
I think stories are the most compelling thing in life, truly. I
Yeah.
mean, they can capture experiences in a way that no data can.
Yeah.
And, I know you've talked about this idea as well. And I like to say that held together captures the extraordinary moments in ordinary lives.
Yeah.
And that's what family life is about. It's these small details, the day to day. And, I'll come back again to this tension
Yeah.
between grief and love and all of it, grief and joy, and all of it existing at once.
Yeah.
And I think the underlying theme of all of it is growth.
Yeah.
So we want to be in relationship with others to watch them grow and to
Yeah.
see ourselves grow.
Yes.
I say toward the end of the very near the end of the book
Yeah.
in thinking about these. So there are a lot of metaphors through the book about gardening
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
seasons, a growth of plants.
Yes.
I will say I am
Well,
not a gardener.
yeah, but the connection to nature is there.
Yes,
Yes, for sure. I loved that.
I definitely am not a gardener. I love plants, but I want them to be just growing in the wilderness and then I go into them. I
Yeah.
don't, it's not, I'm
It's
not a
not your thing.
cultivator of
Yeah.
plants, just kind of probably from a time perspective also.
Yeah.
But there's an important theme in the book about at the beginning. My husband and I are building a kiwi arbor
Yeah.
in our yard, and it's something to do and be productive with our hands. And it becomes a metaphor for a lot of our story. And I reflect on some of this and why it's a relevant metaphor at the end of the book. And I'm thinking right now about in family life, it's the same idea. So we're digging holes to plant this
Yeah.
garden, we're breaking up chunks of dirt and soil, and we're disrupting something, we're breaking something,
Yeah.
knowing that, trusting that we will come there and plant something different.
Yeah.
And we have to give something up in the name of becoming something else
Mm.
and becoming stronger.
I was having a great conversation with one of my first real mentor therapist characters in my life named Greg, who I've
Mhm.
probably mentioned on this podcast before.
Mhm.
And we were talking about the sacrifice of motherhood. And he was
Mhm.
the one that pointed out to me the connection between sacrifice and sacred.
Oh,
And
yes. Yes.
I go back to it. I talk to people about it when I'm in my own coaching, just to have that switch in your brain,
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, those two things go hand in hand. It's like love and loss, but there's
Mhm.
something so powerful about the word sacred and the word sacrifice that feels
Yeah.
like weightier. Because love
Yeah.
and loss, we say, I love you all the time. We use love as a
Mhm.
word in language like all day
Mhm.
long. So
Mhm.
it loses some of what love really is, but the word sacred, it doesn't come up as
Mm.
often. So
That's
that's what
beautiful.
makes me think of breaking the land, and
Yeah.
breaking whatever we need to break to get
Yeah.
a bigger idea of what's possible and what is
Yeah.
sacred in our lives.
And it's about bringing things in with intention. And
Yes.
that's part of being sacred too. And that's why I think one of the things that's so important to me about these stories is they are not at all about biological families.
Yes.
They are very much about who we choose to be part of our family, how
Yes.
we choose to build our families, biologically, adoption, surrogacy, those kind of more traditional routes, if you
Yeah.
will, but also how we create families from the people around us. And that's it's just another form of community, but
Yes.
even closer.
Yes. One of the moments that was very subtle in the book, and I don't even know if you were, I mean, it was like this long of a little moment. You're on an airplane and
I
you
remember.
get good news, so just like
Mhm.
this big, so I won't say what that good news is, but you have this moment of looking around this
All
ordinary,
the other people
yes.
around
And
me and the moments they kind of
oh,
how my life had just changed and pivoted, and no one around me knew anything
yes,
about it, and they
yes,
couldn't see it, and I wondered, and they were all going about their days, getting their snacks out on the airplane and putting away their devices, and
yeah,
everything had changed for me without causing a
yes.
ripple in their lives.
Do you live that moment? Does that change how you look at strangers? Does it change how you approach your
Yeah,
patients?
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the entire book.
It's but
That's
well, I
yeah,
highlighted it because I got a rush of memories of moments like
yeah,
that. Like
yeah,
those twins were born 6 weeks early.
yeah,
My water broke. I delivered at
yep,
Cedars here in West
yep,
Hollywood. And I just remember all the nurses coming in and out. My girls were in the NICU. And every shift in LA is so enormous. You have people
yeah,
all walks of life through that hospital. It's
yeah.
an enormous, renowned hospital. Just looking at people's faces and thinking, how do they know I have two babies? I
How can
wanted
they
to like
not
tattoo it on my forehead. Like,
okay, so
I
you
have two
must
babies. I'm in charge of
you
two humans.
you must have loved the part when in Anna's chapter, her daughter is in the
Yeah.
NICU, and she goes out to the store,
Yeah.
and she's like, "How can the people around me not
Totally.
see? Like,
Yes.
that guy is stocking produce, how can he not look at me
Yes.
and see what's happened?" And she says something like, "I was so raw, so
Yeah.
defenseless, I felt like I should be see-through."
Yes. Oh, it's so beautiful. And it's like that with the hard things too in my own life,
Yeah,
in my clients' lives. Like
yeah,
we'll have these incredible conversations. They're telling me things they can't tell anybody else. That person hangs up the phone. I hang up the phone and I'm like, that woman is just going to
go about her
go
day.
get a burrito for lunch. And she
Yep,
just told me like this just life changing
yeah,
thing about the truth about her marriage or the truth about how she feels about
right.
the worry that she carries for her son or whatever it
Right.
is.
Yeah,
It's
that's the extraordinary and the
yes.
ordinary. That's
That's
it
what
right
made me think
there.
of it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
felt like the fact of bringing all the different types of stories like you said and how we arrive to family on our own terms
yeah,
and what we deem as family,
yeah.
it just is such an invitation for compassion and
Mhm.
respect for people. That's how it changes me. I just look at humans and be
Thank
like,
you.
everyone is living a story. Everyone is
That's what
living a
I hope
love
it
story.
brings.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's I hope it's that moment, like, on the airplane where you maybe for this, you read a story and then you set it down, you look around you and you realize, "Ooh, I have no idea what's happening with all these people, but now I'm
Yeah.
curious." And that
Yes.
makes me more compassionate.
Yes. I don't find enough moments where our news cycle and like our media is really emphasizing common ground. And that's why I knew I wanted to have you on this podcast because I think that's a big theme of the conversations I'm trying to drive and offer on this
Yes.
podcast
Thank you
is
for that.
just
Yes.
where are we more alike than we are
Ugh,
different? And that's a big
completely.
part of this book.
That is such a huge issue in our society is
Yes.
comparing ourselves and finding ourselves unworthy and inadequate. And I want these stories to be an antidote to that because these kinds of stories and hoping that they motivate other people to share stories with the people around them.
Yeah.
This is how we compare to find what we have in common.
Yes.
And that is what stories can do for
Yeah.
us.
And that is everything.
Mhm.
That's literally everything.
Mhm.
And I think as it relates to healing, because so much about this book is a journey of healing, your own personal healing, but all the, just bearing witness to all the other stories. It's just to find that common ground, even for like
Yes.
2 minutes in your marriage or like
Yeah.
1 second with a colleague at work. Like I always tell people like a fourth of an inch, like whatever that little
Yeah.
slither of common ground, just to
Yeah.
step into that in and of itself is a choice to heal.
Yes, because it doesn't have to be a literal common
That's
experience.
right.
It's not about having the common experience. You read these stories, most of them, I think any given reader would feel like, well, that
Yeah.
exact thing is never going to happen to me. And
Yes.
yet, when you read these stories, you really do see yourself, I think I did, in every person
Yes.
and see some of the same fears and longings and wonderings.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why they're so universal.
Yeah. So you came up with a perfect title. In
So
my
thank
opinion.
you. Thank you.
I think I
It took a
told you
while.
this, yes, before we started recording. You had me at Shared Memoir. It's like that line in Jerry Maguire, you had me at hello. I'm like,
Right,
okay,
right.
okay, she's got me. I think there should be more
Great.
memoirs that are shared memoirs. So
I hope so. I hope this inspires more because I want to read them
yes,
all.
me
I couldn't find
too.
anything like this when I was doing it. I
Yeah.
still haven't found anything like it in that way, and I want them all. I want to read them.
Yeah.
So please keep someone else write more of them.
Yeah, exactly. So did this come during the middle of the writing the book, during the after, but held together? It's and tell us what it means to you.
Thank you. Well, backstory wise, I guess I would say I went through a bunch of different working titles and felt all through the probably 9 years of the 10 years,
Yeah.
no, this isn't quite our title, but like it's fine for now with different titles, subtitles, different
Yeah.
variations. I knew it early on. It would be either something like a community memoir or a shared memoir of
Yeah.
blah, 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 motherhood medicine and something, something.
Yeah.
We had the basic idea and the rhythm of the title, but held together, I think, really came through when getting close enough that I had to pick something. I mean, we don't always get to pick our titles. A
Yeah,
lot of authors
for
don't.
sure.
And so I was really grateful. My editor, my agent are just, I've had a really wonderful team and I appreciate them.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that they not only wanted my input on the title, but really pushed me to find it
Yeah.
and to come up with it.
Yeah.
And so the way that what this came from, I think it goes back to my anthropology days
Yeah.
and those life stories and medical anthropology classes that I took. But I'm not sure that I like created it, but I feel like I came to it somehow in college in one of those programs, thinking about how friends that I met back then would often have a really life altering, identity forming story that I probably didn't learn early on in that friendship. But
Yeah.
after time, that person, they would share it with me. And I came to realize many people had one of these stories that they held on
Yeah.
to a little too tightly, if you will,
Yes.
or extra tightly beyond, more than other stories, at least. I won't judge that it's too tightly or not tightly enough. That's
Yeah.
not for me to judge. But they held these stories very tightly. And as I say in the introduction, fearing the power they contained and waiting to be told.
Yeah.
And once that person offered that story to me, I felt like then we had this whole new level of the relationship to explore and to appreciate together. And talking with some of these people and sharing that idea, they like, oh, yeah, that kind of does
Yes.
happen. I hold on to this story and then I offer it. And so I wanted this book to be about those kinds of stories that we guard, but then once we offer them, now we're holding them too tightly, but then we hold them out
Yeah.
and we offer them. And then the book itself holds them all together
Yes.
as something greater than the sum of its parts
Yeah.
because our individual stories can be beautiful, but they have so much more meaning when we gather them and they can reflect on and weave into each other.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's just the idea that as women, as mothers, as people, as families, we're always trying to hold things together, even when they're falling
For
apart.
sure. That's absolutely the truth. And what I love about the title and what I love about the heart of this book, there's a strength to it. Like held together, like
Mm.
we're stronger together, that
Mm.
kind of idea. But
Yeah.
you don't go into the sentimentality, of
Mhm.
it. Like it is touching. It is for sure heart-based and all those things, but there's a strength in it. And I really
Mhm.
appreciated that. I think the title captures exactly what it is.
Thanks.
So I want to just for my people who are creatives and have a book in their mind and all that, can you tell us
Yeah.
what your hope is for the book and how it's if this process of you've been talking about it a lot. I'm so grateful
Yes.
that you gave
Yes.
us your time.
Oh, and
Um
thanks for the invitation.
yeah.
I really see this as a book that is passed from one friend to another.
Yeah.
It feels like a book you want to hold. Again, held, right? You want to hold it in
Yeah.
your hands. They did such a beautiful job with it. The design team, I love the cover, the
Yeah,
whole thing. It's
same.
just an experience to
Yeah.
hold it. And I envision one person taking this book in her hands and just pressing it into the hands of a friend and saying, you
Yeah.
have to read this
Yeah.
because of this story or because of whatever, like just imploring her to read it. And so I envision it being shared, one book at a time.
Yeah.
And very much a long vision for that. I tried to write it to be very evergreen without kind of dating this kind of technology or that kind of event. There are historical events in it that shape people's lives,
Yeah.
but those are things that we all want to know and learn from. They're not sort of things that will feel dated later when we read the stories.
Yeah.
So there's that. I hope that everybody who reads it and who it resonates with will understand that it would just mean so much to all of us if you would take it, the link, the book, whatever,
Yeah.
and share it with a couple of friends or family members that you think would feel the same. And
Yeah.
that's how I hope it will grow.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
and then I hope it will
beautiful.
get into medical schools and
I
nursing programs.
yes.
I'm working on that as
I was
well.
gonna I
And
think that's a great
yeah,
hope for it. I was thinking that
yeah,
in reading it, like there really is a lot, and we didn't talk about it today, but we could do a whole podcast on the intersection of motherhood and medicine and what women who work in the medical field and as doctors
right.
and are also mothers, what their motherhood brings to medicine, the
Yes, yes, and
exchange between that,
yes,
I think is a
and I tried
big
to make it to
theme.
be it's write it to be really, really accessible on that level. So
Yeah.
while if you do have any kind of medical background or interest in reading medical stories, you're going to enjoy those parts. I
Yeah.
think even more so as a reader with even no background in medicine other than having been a patient or your family,
Yeah.
as we all become from time to time.
Yeah.
Um, the way that I've written this, I hope that it lets people just feel immersed in it in a way that they don't even realize that they're learning about what it's like to go through those kinds of
Yeah.
medical experiences. There's no jargon. Any unusual things are explained in the context in a way that feels like you don't really notice you're coming to understand what it means as
Yeah.
you read it.
And do
Um,
you feel, just this is more of on the personal note,
mhm.
I know that you're open hearted. I mean, you were already open hearted arriving to the process of writing the book because you went through everything that you went through and you're so
Over
devoted.
time, I
Yeah.
try.
So, was there anything that surprised you personally about how this book changed you and how you arrive now in your life, in
Mm.
family life, in your professional life?
Well, I hope that getting these stories out there is just the beginning of that because
Yeah.
listening to them and hearing each woman's story in a way, I knew all of these women beforehand in some way, whether
Yeah.
as my patient I met in clinic a handful of times or as a friend going back decades.
Yeah.
Um, I knew something about all of their stories,
Yeah.
but the surprise was when we sat down and really made that time to listen. Again, we're coming back to that theme, like Devorah's
Yeah.
story of listening and making space
Yeah.
for the details. It was amazing how much I hadn't known.
Yes.
I didn't assume I knew everything, but it was just a whole new level. And so I hope that that made me even more aware of that and more open to those kinds of interactions, even in small moments. Now I hope that I can allow that space, even if time is more limited,
Yes.
because
Yes.
I'm able to kind of channel that energy a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it's great if we have larger amounts of time to connect with people and really sit with them. That's wonderful. And we should make more a priority of that when we
Yeah.
can. But we can still carry this attitude of being open-hearted and
Yeah.
open-minded and listening just to understand, not to judge,
Yeah.
not to help or correct
Yes.
anything in this person's life, but just to be a witness.
Yeah. Gosh, that's beautiful. That's a lesson that we all could use. It's not modeled very often. I have
And
to
I'm
have
still
it.
learning it. We're
Yes,
all
I was going
learning
to say
it.
I
It's
have
all the time.
my kids are constantly redirecting me. Even one of their friends, Becca, who I love. This was years ago. We're driving in the car and Becca was having drama about some way that she felt about another friend in the car, and
Okay.
she's real extroverted, and I love our friendship. I've known her since she was 5. And she tells me the drama, and I immediately jump in to solve it. And I'm like, well, you could
Right.
think about it this way. And she's like, Paige, I don't want to hear your opinion right now, which was so great because it's not even my own daughter. And I was so humbled.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's right. Like, even
Yeah,
with
that's a good
kids,
lesson.
yeah,
I've
they
thought
don't want a
about that and
solution.
a lot of advice these days to,
Yeah.
ask your kids when they come to you with a problem or do you just
Yes,
want to be listened to? Do you want me to help you solve this? Like ask them what they're
absolutely.
looking for and
Yeah.
they'll tell you.
Yeah.
It's
That's
good advice.
true.
I've heard it in many settings and I try to remember it.
Yeah. Well, you really did a great job. This is such a gift. It's an offering. I loved reading it. I loved that we got to connect in this month of May and celebrating and honoring all the ways that we nurture each other, not just
Mm.
biological moms, but
Yeah.
all the
Many ways to be a
mothering. That's
mother.
right.
Many ways to be a mother.
That's right.